Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Rocket Talk. I am your host, Lawler, and with me is the one and only Mega Shogun. How you doing, Shogi? Shogi, how you doing? Shogun?
Yeah.
I was
Yes,
muted.
Lawler.
It's my fault.
Oh.
How you doing, buddy?
Great start. Yeah, I'm doing good.
Thanks, man. 10 out of 10.
So pro.
Yeah, that's how we do it here. That's how we do it. The song was just, it took me back, so I couldn't do anything about it. So I forgot to click the other button.
Weren't you?
Yeah, I was in the zone, man. I was in the zone. But for those that are new here or who haven't been here, for those that missed it, a couple weeks back we did an announcement about a new PO called Rocket Talk. For those that weren't here beforehand, I used to do a podcast called That's the Thing, where we talked about certain topics that were important and stuff. It was awful, as you can see by Shogun shaking his head, I guess.
So back up there. What were you gonna call me?
Nothing.
Yeah,
you got facial.
Exactly
you got facial hair now, and it threw me off. Like, I didn't know what to do. I was scared.
I'll go completely baby smooth. I have the world's babiest face.
It's so round.
It's so round. Why is it so round?
I don't know. But usually what we do is we talk about a certain topic that's either prevalent to the community or something that we find that is important. If you guys want to see any of those, you can go to my YouTube, !social in the chat. It'll pop that open. Otherwise, it is youtube.com/LawlerRL or just Lawler. Either one of those works. Or I don't know how the unique URL worked out, but both transfer you to my channel, so it works out. It's pretty cool. But we talk about stuff usually for about half hour, 45 minutes, and this week is actually a really good one. We're going to be talking about the difference between North America and Europe, other than the fact that EU is better. Shogun. So we can just get that out of the way. EU is a better region, guys. You've heard it here.
You've taken away about half of my commentary on this. But it's good, because that was at least 2 hours of it.
Yeah, good. We had to shut it down quick. So basically, there's going to be three. Yeah, there's three major topics that we're going to be talking about as they show below. The first one is the mentality and the directness from NA versus EU. Number two will be the difference in age. And number three, something that I'm really excited and probably my favorite part of this all, because Shogun is an old veteran. The SARBC era. I'm excited to see like what you bring to the table with that. That's probably what I'm most excited for. I could care less about everything else, to be completely honest. But to get right into it, this is going to be the first week of Rocket Talk. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Any feedback, greatly appreciated. Don't be afraid to hit us up on social media in any way. But just so you guys are aware, to kind of preface all this, despite everything that is being discussed today, these are generalizations. There are expectations of what is being said. Not all of this follows everything. So there are going to be certain things that we say in regards to, no, there is a player in the scene that actually does this the opposite, or what have you. Okay? So first up, mentality and directness when it comes to improving, learning, etc. And I think me and Shogun both agree on this one quite a bit. NA is pretty sensitive. What do you think about that, Shogun?
I honestly, I can't really speak for how NA works because I haven't been around it all that much. But obviously, as you mentioned earlier, generalization is NA is maybe less receptive to very critical opinions of them, and there's more of like a flashback approach, like, oh yeah, but what about you, sort of thing, rather than taking on board what's said to them. It's like, yeah, but you don't have the right to be saying that to me, or you do this as well, and that's towards anyone in the community, either fellow players, other people that are just observing. Like I said, it's a generalization of it. But EU, it's one of those cases of you've come into this scene around people like Marky Duda, okay? Right. The fact that you're being told to F off is just part of it.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to like kind of summarize it is like, when I talk to people in NA, is like they feel it's like an attack on their character. Like when I say, hey man, you didn't rotate, you screwed up, or Neat Mike, you got to stop blaming lag. Hey Mike, we noticed you. Also, Leaf, thank you for the host, man.
Just bad.
That's a nice, little pamphlet there. Appreciate the host, man. For all the new viewers that guys don't know what's going on, this is Rocket Talk, where we talk about topics in the RL community. Today's guest is Callum the Shogun, RL caster extraordinaire, king of sellout. I don't know what else to go with.
Sold out once.
It was a great one, man. It totally worked. It was super good. But we're talking about NA versus EU today. So far, we are on the first topic, which is mentality and directness. Basically getting on the point that right now with NA as a generalization, when you critique them or say, hey, there's certain things that are going on, or hey, you need to improve upon this, they feel like it's a personal attack towards them. Like they're not taking it for what it is. And reality of the situation is that when I say, hey, man, you're doing this wrong or something, there's two factors that go into it. Number one usually is it something... Shogun just keeps kind of finding more things. What are you doing? But
just keep going. It's good.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, do I really need to critique them? Because in most cases, a pro player knows the mistakes that they are making, and there's certain circumstances where they don't. And as your teammate, I want what's best for the team, and I want to improve the best. And being in that sense, I'm going to tell you, like, hey, man, this is a problem, or hey, this needs to be improved. And rather than it being very direct, like it is in EU in most circumstances, they're like, oh, well, he thinks that I'm a bad person or a terrible teammate, or he hates me or something stupid like that. When in reality, it's just like, dude, I want you to rotate because you missed on this hit. You should know that, but just in case you don't, I'm letting you know.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that one. Like I said, it's very difficult for a lot of players, and it's the hard part of coming into it. And we've sort of seen it as well, because we critique each other as casters. We've got our own little weekly post-morts.
Yeah, do you wanna kind of explain how we do that with post-morts?
What we basically do is we get to the end of the weekend. We just sit in a room and we go around in a circle, and it is very much I'm not gonna say no holds barred, because we're not trying to tear each other down. It's more of like here is what I think, okay, and you either take it on board or you don't, but you will listen to me.
Yeah.
And that is the main part, and if you don't take it on board, fine. But if you're not improving because you're not taking it on board, that's even worse. And you have to separate what is business. Like, I can literally see someone in your chats mentioned it. It's business, and you have to separate what is business from what is your real life. And the reason why people are telling you these things is to make you better.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, in the sense of how it applies, like, it's tough because we're in a situation where we all came in as equals, as casters, and we all, I would consider, are pretty good friends. Like, we get along really well.
This sounds an awful lot like a team, so this
yeah,
is
so
still going in the right direction.
Yeah, so for like team play, it's the same situation. Like, we all want what's best for each other because we're all reliant on each other as well. So taking it into consideration and basically stating like, hey man, like, this is important, like, please improve on it because I genuinely want you to improve, I want us to improve, is the way that you should take it, rather as like, hey man, you suck. Which, when we can't think of something to say about the person, usually that's what we go with, like, you suck. Why? You just do. Like,
yeah, one of the problems that comes in though is that separation is incredibly... This is not us just saying separate it, because we know how hard that is. This is not like a 9-to-5 job where you're getting up and you leave the house. For a lot of people, you're already in the house. That's where you do all your personal stuff anyway. So it's very hard to make that distinction between the two. But it does need to be done. And we're seeing, like, people mention maybe a coach. I would 100% agree with a coach. Maybe even just a player manager. Someone who, rather than me going up to Lawler as my teammate and just going, dude, don't do this, sort of thing, and us having an argument, going maybe to a third party who goes to it all. And I honestly believe player coaches or player managers are going to be really important in the future just to keep teams in check.
Now, if you guys haven't seen it, I did my actual last, That's the Thing that I did, the podcast, on my YouTube. It's week 21. It's the very last one. Is literally 30 to 45 minutes of just me talking about why player managers and coaches are important. Check it out. It's a really good conversation. Next thing with the NA and EU kind of concept, there's a lot of individualism in NA. Like, people want to be the best that they can, but it's almost as if they like keep it to themselves. Like they're almost, it's not that it's like selfish, but it's like they feel like it's very cutthroat. Like they have to look out for themselves because there is a lot of competition. One of the problems with NA is it's not that it's a problem, it's actually a really good thing for our community, is that it's such a big region. There's so much competition to being the best. But despite that, like, if you can show consistency and you put in the best practices early, which a lot of the teams don't, like a lot of teams just won't scrim, they won't commit to a consistent schedule. Like if you're one of those teams that comes through and does it, like the Flying Dutchman is a perfect example. not the best mechanically around, but they practiced. They had a good strategy going in, and it worked. It brought them all the way to LAN. Like,
yeah, and the Flying Dutchman is actually a very good example of a team that. I mean, Vogan was never the best player mechanically. You know, he probably wasn't even up to RLCS standard at the time mechanically. But that is not all what it is now, and we see this with players like Pashi. Pashi is no longer a superstar player. He is now the core of a team, which is two very different things. You know, superstar player, you're looking at score, score, score. Instead, Pashi is now that person that you probably would pick first if you could start your team. Just be like, right, we've got him. Now we can pick two more of whatever we want because we know Pashi is going to do his job well. So I feel like Pashi is like an evolution upon Vogan at this point of both being a team captain and a strong enough player mechanically to do his own role.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, I mean, in the NA side and versus the EU side, like Pashi, like you said, is a prime example. Like Gibbs talks about him being the MVP for this season for EU simply because not of the aspect of his play and whatever, but because of what he does for the team and what he brings to the team as a captain. I think that's something that's like underutilized. I mean, you look at it even in the aspect of like Kronovi. Kronovi is the poster boy of Rocket League. Everybody knows it. His numbers show it. But that also means that he's under the most critique. He gets the most flack. He gets the most, you know, eyes on him, which also backs in the same way. But the way that he handles it, the way that he carries himself, like that boy takes it on the chin, and he handles it really, really well. But it doesn't affect him. A lot of people complain because he doesn't have the greatest personality and stuff. But you gotta understand, he's a 19-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid, like in front of how many of thousands of people. Like it's a lot, and he handles it for the most part pretty well. And even on the team side, the mental stability that he brings to a team is bar none one of the best in North America.
Crow is actually a very interesting case in terms of what happens, because you can look back at his VODs from tournaments he would do with Gibbs and Sad Jr., and the way that he would speak to people to the way he speaks to people now is very, very different. It's a case of,
I can agree.
He was very passive-aggressive in the old days. And I feel like all the attention that's on him, it could do one of two things. Either it breaks him, or it forces him to mold into, as you said, the poster boy. And the poster boy has got to do certain things. He's got to be a good leader. He basically has to be the perfect player, which he's not. But he's trying his hardest to be that, and that is also involving the way you speak to people, the way you go about what you're trying to do, the way you're trying to improve the rest of your team. And I think he's realized now, he's changed it. And you can see it now in the way he speaks, the way he streams. He's doing everything correctly for me at this moment in time. And it's all through his mentality. He just went, right, everyone's watching me. I can either get criticized for doing everything wrong, or... and this might even not be the way his personality naturally is, but he is forcing himself into that idol role, you know, one that everyone should want to be.
Yeah, completely agree. And I guess this is like kind of the last part I want to take about like mentality difference before we go into the EU aspect more. So do you feel like NA, for me, like sometimes they're just not realistic in their approach? There's too many times I see a lot of teams where they don't accept the hard facts. Like, there's certain times where we're like, all right, we could have beat them because of this and this and this. And I'm like, I hate to break it to you guys, but you didn't have a chance in hell. You just aren't good enough at this moment. And that's something that I feel EU does better with. Like, they just come to terms with what they need immediately so they can focus on what's important.
When it comes to this, there's actually a philosophy behind it, which you will see in sports coaching, which I don't actually see being employed to this. And you can apply it to anything. If you want to get good at anything in the world, you apply this particular concept, which is you finish what you're trying to do, and you have a conversation about it afterwards. You know, we could finish playing a game. I'll go and talk about with my team afterwards, and then we'll make notes. We'll go back and watch what we did, and we'll make notes of 3 things we did well, 3 things we did badly. And then you go about training those things and improving those things. So you're going around in a circle. You've got to this, you started here, you're going around to this point. Now you're trying to improve this stuff. And then you get to here, you're doing competition again. You get back to this point. You're back to conversations about it. It's called the coaching cycle. And we don't see enough teams doing it because they want to, as you said, they want to just do it in a straight line. They want to be good, you know, good, best.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. You have to keep going around in this circle all the time. Otherwise, you do not improve. So yeah, it's maybe a case of just, I want it now, I want it now. No, that's not how it works. You focus on the little things, constantly improve, and you remind yourself of the stuff you're doing well. By all means, please do it, because you will knock yourself down mentally so quickly if you don't.
Yeah, I think that's where that burnout kind of mentality, like you're talking, is like, I've been putting in all this work and it's not paying off. I mean, I think Orbit was the product of that. Orbit had been putting in so much work, time, and effort and practice to where then they get knocked out and took 7th place, and they're just like, we can't take it anymore. We need something different. I mean, there's other factors, like, obviously.
Do that after every single tournament. Not even maybe every single tournament. Every single week. Get to the end. What did we do well this week? If you're having the exact same problem you had last week, you need to really focus on it. But make notes of it. Make notes. All right, I did this thing really well twice, and that's been pointed out to me by my teammates twice in a row. And I've been pointing out that I'm doing this really bad thing. That's never been an issue before, but it's not a one-off. Fix it now. Keep going around in the cycle. Keep improving. But not enough players are doing that right now, and I feel like having that extra meeting, like a little post-more every single week, would be so good for so many of these players. But they just, I don't think it's a case of being ignorant and not wanting to know about it. I think it's just that they don't know that sort of way of improving exists.
Right. And I think that's why, like, we go back, the seriousness and aspect of it too. I think player managers would help with this kind of stuff to help them just keep it on track. So before we end on this aspect and switch over to EU, quote from Markey said in a Red Bull article, quote, NA teams are just shit, and chastise NA players on a whole for emphasizing showy moves, not being critical enough when teammates make mistakes. Garrett G then had a response. I believe what Markey said is true, that North America is too nice and players don't take improving seriously. Everyone in North America is extremely sensitive and takes everything way too personal. While it's fuel for me, I'm sure players in North America looked at the statement and all probably hate Marky Duda for it. Even though he's just speaking the truth, if there's a team in North America that can change his mind, I believe it's ours. So there is players that, like I said, are and can be exceptions to this circumstance where they recognize, like, he's just telling you like it is, and you can either A, accept it, take it to heart and move and improve from it, or you're just going to be salty about it and it's going to tilt you, for that matter. So Shogun, I guess more on the EU side, I mean, more than being direct, what are some key characteristics to EU that you think really differ that we haven't covered yet, if there's any?
Yeah, obviously there's the more directness of it all. There's also more direct competition between everyone. There is more often where you'll play against another top team all the time, and we'll be going into that a bit more later on when we talk about why depth is kind of coming into all of this. But it's a case of you are constantly being challenged. In NA, there are less top teams, therefore you'll get challenged less often, which means that you're going to look at your mistakes less often, because a lot of the time you're already winning if you're a top player. You know, in EU, you'll go from one match to another, and you're very likely to lose both, which means that you're always looking at yourself and just going like, right, what's wrong? And your teammate will tell you exactly what's wrong. You know, it's obviously it's a generalization that EU is better with dealing with it. There are a lot of players, and I'm not going to name them, that are very bad at dealing with that sort of criticism. But because they get hit with it more often, a lot of the players that we're remaining with in EU are either players that can deal with criticism, or the ones that can't deal with criticism have already been taken out of the scene because they can't handle it all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting in that kind of aspect how those situations do arise, because in psychology, usually when you're trying to coach or teach or something to anybody, positive reinforcement works better. You learn better and you obtain information better when there's a good feeling. Those endorphins are released to your brain. Even though a negative situation, you learn from and remember stronger. It's weird how it works, to where if something negative happens and you get your heart broken or something, that's something that's going to live with you for the rest of your life. It's really weird. So in the aspect of EU, where it is a little bit more difficult to get into that top 8 because of how good the region is, and we'll get into that stuff later with the SARBC stuff, it's interesting that these guys have all this negative impact and they're able to then focus in a different way, where NA, it's a little bit more lenient, it's a little bit more carefree, it's a little bit more fun, I guess, in a sense. And then when they do get faced with difficulties, the backlash or their response to it is different. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it really is. Like, it is exactly what it is. Obviously, you're dealing with the people, but I feel like you've hit the nail on the head on that one.
Yeah. So that's going to do it for Mentality and Directness. For those that are joining us and those that are still here, greatly appreciate it. We are talking about NA versus EU and the differences that it brings in not only the Rocket League scene, but also esports in general, because some of this stuff does equate to that as well. We just finished up with Mentality and Directness, moving into difference in age, and we've got some interesting thoughts in chat. But I can't wait to see what they hear after we see it.
They've jumped the gun on that one, haven't they?
Yeah, they're going to get some differing options once we get into it. And the big one, and I want to hit the nail right on the head, someone in chat actually said that age doesn't make a difference. And I'm here to tell you why I think it does. Number one, and the biggest one that Garrett actually said in chat, is that in most cases, and it definitely depends on your upbringing, your parents and stuff, age usually brings two things: wisdom and maturity. As you grow, you learn things aren't a gimme. You learn things you have to work for them. You have to, as an adult, pay bills and cover your own food and put a roof over your head and all this other kind of stuff. And that's certain things that, as silly as it sounds, when I was a 15, 16-year-old kid, I thought I knew everything. I wasn't wrong. I had everything in my hands. Like, I was going to rule the world. And I got smacked in the face with student loans. And I'm like, shit. Like, it is more difficult than I thought. And it's one of those things that there's so many things that change from the age that, and I'm sure you would agree, from 17 to 18 and then from 18 to 19, life changes to like an excruciating amount.
As someone that is still roughly around that age, actually, of still the transitions happening, yeah, it is a huge amount of difference. 17 to 18, you've still got, at least like from my experience, you've still got very few responsibilities. You don't. And below that, you've still got very few responsibilities, and you might have less going on. But once you get past 18, you've got to work. You're either working or you're doing a degree. That's pretty much your only options. So, and that shock of going from one to the other is huge. It is. And I'm literally in that transition period. I'm coming out of education now, and the very first job I'm doing is this.
Right.
So it's one of those, oh yeah, real life is sort of there. So I can only really speak from someone that's currently in that transition period. And yeah, mentally and even like putting numbers and keeping you with realism in your head, age makes a difference. It absolutely does. But, and here's the big but, a lot of esports players are roughly around my age or younger.
Right.
So whilst mentality does come into it, whilst you're around this age, you need to have the mentality right now. You can't grow into it, because by the time you do, it's already passed you by.
And you have to retire, or you're washed up, which is crazy. I mean, the typical lifespan for an esports player, and I can totally understand the situation where we had the whole brand aspect, is these players technically have a lifespan of 2 to 4 years, and I understand I'm worrying about right now because at that circumstance, like, I can't focus to the future because I may not be able to play with how good kids are getting and how natural it is for someone to just pick up a controller and you get the scrub killers coming in, that it's just second nature to them. I understand that you have to put in all these hours to work and practice, otherwise you're going to get passed up. I know it's different, and this is from an NA side of it, and I know it's different from you guys in EU because that's something that I've been talking to you about. In NA, when you grow up, usually in school, high school, roughly, from your freshman year to your senior year, you have a couple options. In most of the circumstances, you either A, are just in school, you have school and job, or you do school and sports. And then some of the crazy people do all three, and it's quite the balance. But it's one of those things that helps you later on. My parents growing up, I had to pay for everything. I wanted a car, I needed gas, it had to come out of my own pocket. But then you're trying to balance that also with going to school, also with doing sports, and then you get some of these kids that also want to do it with playing in a professional esport. And it's like, how do you do all these things? And it's tough. There's a lot of things that you may not realize in how to utilize that. And there's sacrifices that have to be taken. And those are some of the things that you learn, and how to really, time management is crucial. Those things take time to learn and adapt what works for you as a person. And the more time that you've been alive and in this world and actually able to test out what works for you, the better. The issue is all these kids, and I remember talking to Turtle about this a long time ago. If you guys don't know, Turtle plays for Atelier now. He used to play for Orbit with Garrett and all those other guys. He had a struggle about whether he wanted to be a kid and just hang out with his buddies at school and play sports and talk to girls, or if he wanted to completely make esports his life. he went to the first LAN and was like, okay, this is awesome. I want it to be esports. And it's one of those things that's something that gets overlooked so much. These kids have to really pretty much give up being a kid. And that's something that, obviously being in that age, I never had to worry about, because esports weren't really a thing that was in a viable path for me when I was that age. Like, yeah, I watched Halo on TV, but that was it. In EU, I think it's different for you guys. I mean, the way that you guys brought up through education, like you said, if you go to school, I mean, your government kind of helps you guys out with that. You don't have to pay taxes after a certain, like, for a certain point and stuff. But for NA, it's just like, here's all this crap the government does, and we're just going to dump it on you all at once. Good luck and have fun.
Yeah, I think, and once again, I'm going to talk from experience on this one. When you're in European education, at least the way mine was, is that you go there and you get out at 3 p.m. Now, for me, I went down the sports route. I did my kickboxing stuff, which was every day. And effectively, yeah, I had to give up being a kid, because you left at 5 p.m. So you got back, basically got changed, had something to eat, and then you left. And then you got back at 9 p.m. and you went to bed. And it can really be the exact same thing for esports, which is a case of you get home and you play, and you've got to play. Whether or not it's the same thing is still yet to be seen. I mean, we need more time, really, to be able to say for 100% certain, and we need more examples of how it goes down. Like, how much do you have to commit to be successful at esports? And that could take another 5 years or so for us to figure out on that one.
And it's different for every person too. Like, there's some people that just naturally will be like, I'm a god. And then there's other people that really have to grind it. Like, Kronovi is not one of those people that's just naturally really good. He's just been doing it and practiced his ass off. And people don't realize that.
Even your options to do it aren't really up to you. It can be, your parents' financial situation. Your parents make a huge difference in whether or not you can even attempt to go pro from these young ages. Because if your parents are not in a great financial situation, they are going to push you towards going for an early job. If you're going for that early job, you've got less playing time. You're probably not going to make it. We can see. I mean, we could look at Timmy here.
Right. He can only play on weekends.
Generalizations.
Right? Yeah. But that's the difference, though. Like, Timmy can only play on weekends. For those that don't know, Timmy is a younger player. His parents only let him play on Saturdays and Sundays, which is in the RLCS, and he still pops off because he's a god. And he still puts in 50 hours on the weekends. Yes. Because that's the only way that he can. Like, I don't know how he comes in cold and still does what he does.
Yeah, and NA's got to play on Saturday as well.
Right.
So, yeah, it's pretty brutal at that point in time. And we do see it with some teams as well, of they don't care anymore. And we don't know what part of the mentality of that is, but we've got teams like that. We could name drop, but there are players out there that have played 80 hours of CSGO this week and 10 hours of Rocket League.
It's less than 10.
And they're in the RLCS, and you could probably figure out who that is if you call it out in chat. Doesn't really matter to us,
right?
Mentally, you won't have that on any other team, especially not on EU, because a lot of EU are looking at it and they're saying, right, this is an opportunity. Set to Destroy have also got this in their heads of they know they can't make it, but it's still an opportunity to improve. Whilst these players are looking at it and just go, we can't win, no point.
Right. It's definitely different, and it's one of those things, like, it's about taking care of the opportunities that you have, and I hate that we keep going back to this whole build your brand crap. As great as a meme as beautiful as a meme as it's become, it's actually really important. I mean, the opportunities that you have right now to really grow in stuff like Rocket League is not going to be around forever. So why not take this exposure that I have, and even if it is only 100, 200, 300 viewers, that's still enough to start building this base to where you can have this viewer base, whatever game you go to, whatever variety you play, whatever it is, that, like, you as a person and a personality rather than the Rocket League player. And that's something that that differs. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to really utilize this option, and it's tough because these players are balancing, okay, I need to practice so I show up so I can go to the LAN so I can make money, but at the same time I've got to find a way to balance, okay, how the heck do I do this but still stream and all this other kind of stuff? Because no, streaming is not the same as playing offline and focus just on the game. I am one of the frequent ones that I have to talk to chat, because without chat I don't have anything. But it makes me lose games because of it. and I've accepted that. I know I'm not a pro player. I'm not. People don't come to my stream for gameplay. We know that.
No.
So it's like, it's one of those things that obviously for a player, maybe something that you have to do is come to terms that, you know what, chat isn't for me. I have to focus on the game and make that aware. Like, there's certain situations that you have to try out and see what works for you. And it's a tough balance for these players to where, like, I think it was Garrett who says he plays about 7 hours a day. It's the only way that he can keep up his form and his pace and stuff. And I don't know if that's exactly the amount, but that's still a lot of time to dedicate to something. Plus, then you got to find a way to sleep, eat, go to school, and stream and all this other kind of stuff in it as well. Like, it's tough. And the kid's 16. When I was 16, yeah, I was wondering if I could get Becky's number and that I had soccer practice at 3. You know, like, there was certain things that are tough that these guys are trying to balance. And then, like Garrett said in chat, what happens if you just don't enjoy it? There's certain times where I get it. It sucks, but you got to make a living somehow, and you got to figure out how to do it. That's part of life, man. Like, I grew up hating the jobs that I worked, but it allowed me to make my car payment because I needed a car to get to A and B. It's the only way I could go to sports. So there's sacrifices.
It's a package at the end of the day. Being a pro player in Rocket League is a package, and it's not just playing. That is a part of the package. Streaming is part of the package, especially if you're not winning every single tournament. You've got to make that money somehow. I feel like admitting publicly that you don't enjoy streaming, probably not the smartest move ever, especially if you ever do need to take down that route. But if you do win the LAN, then perfect. Who really cares at that point?
Right.
You know, I don't think we're going to be talking about your lack of streaming if you end up winning a LAN.
Right. If you're a god on the field, then who cares, right?
But to be a pro player in anything, it's a package of different things. I mean, you can look at it in any other sport as well. You know, Usain Bolt, he's an ambassador. You look at any football player, they've got to go and do commercials or go and speak to media or any of the rest of this sort of stuff. For players, you've got to fit in playing in tournaments, practicing, and I feel like some scheduling might be needed in this, scrims, you know, social media management, streaming if you need that sort of money. That's probably about it from what I can remember here, but that's a package. That is all stuff that you either have to do or some of those that you can do.
Right.
And it all comes together to form your own little, as you would say, brand. You know, but it's more or less what your business is. Your business is you are a Rocket League player. People want to see you play Rocket League. They want to see you everywhere because they are a fan of you. And if you don't take advantage of that, if you are not playing at your best, you are not maximizing out on what you can do with your opportunity.
Right. It's one of those things too, like you said, that, you know, it's one of those things that it's tough because there's all these things that you can and can't do, and you have to find out what works for you. Obviously, like, you have to take care of you first. That's most important.
Yes.
And that's something that comes with time and age, obviously, which is the whole point we're talking. Appreciate you guys all being in chat. For those that are new here, this is Rocket Talk. We are talking about NA versus EU and the difference. If you missed earlier, we were talking about mentalities and directness. Right now, we're talking about the difference in age, and to kind of get us back on track. The big thing I want to look at, and this is something that you and I were talking curiously about, is the difference in age when it came to the LAN was actually way closer than I thought. Out of both LANs so far, the players that have made it are Garrett, Turtle, Classics, Lucinio, and Insol, and that's ages that are 18 and younger. For EU, it was Turbo, Dogu, Devo, and K-Dop. So it's within a player, okay? And I thought it was actually much less, but it's crazy to see that some of the teams that, and I was trying to find a way to see if it correlated, teams that had younger rosters got knocked out earlier, but it's been a mixed bag. But then the players that have done better in EU have been surrounded by older players. So it's like, there goes my thought process of trying to make it work. So
yeah, it's very much, I mean, you had the right thought process. There was definitely possibly a link there. There just wasn't one.
No, it just, and that'll come over time. I'll keep a track of that over time, though. We
look at these names here, though, and these are a lot of difference-making players. Mm-hmm. You know, these are players that are really good together, but they do need someone on that team. Maybe not even a player on that team, but someone just to be confident in. You know, because you don't want to, especially when you're younger, you do not want to go into the idea of being a pro player and you being the one leading the charge. You know, especially for pretty much none of these players I see on here, I would really want leading the charge at any point on this. Not yet, anyway. Maybe 2 or 3 more years where they've got a bit more experience under their belts. But it's a case of Garrett was incredible at the last LAN. There's no real way of going about it, and he's still playing really well right now. Turtle is having the season of his life at this moment in time. You know, Atelier have really shot themselves into that top 4. Every player on this, Lichinio, we're not seeing much of him, but they're still sticking around. You know, these are all players that play really well. And it's more of a case of you'd probably have to interview each of them individually to see what they think about this sort of thing, because all we can do is speculate. But if you speak to them individually, you just say, when you look at your teammates, do you see them as people that are leading you in the right direction, or does it not make a difference? Because we might be just sprouting hot garbage with this.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, from talking to teams, obviously there's a lot of circumstances that I don't want to bring into light because it's privileged information and they confide it in me to not talk about it. But team chemistry is a huge thing, and age helps out with that. When you have someone that's a little bit more mature, that mentally stable, can say, all right, guys, like, yeah, we may have lost the series, but let's keep on the right track. Let's focus on what's important and stuff. Or maybe someone, like you said, like a player manager or a coach, or someone that can take or like from a biased, like, outside perspective where, yes, you made those mistakes, but you know what those mistakes were. Let's focus on what's important. This is what we needed to. This is the match that's coming up. Let's make sure we don't do this stuff, and just kind of re-channel where that energy is going and put it somewhere else that's in a more positive manner. And having someone usually that is older is going to do better in that, just from experience. But it also depends, like you said, the people that you surround yourself with. If you're friends with people, like, there's been times where I play games with a good buddy of mine, and I physically cannot play competitive games with him anymore. He takes it way too serious. He gets super pissed off. I just can't do it. It's not fun anymore. Yeah. No matter how much we all try to, like, be like, dude, it's first blood. It's not a big deal. He still gets tilted. So we can't do it. And it's one of those things that when we play in a carefree environment, we're all just having drinks and blowing, the best experience I've ever had. Yeah. So you have to find a way to surround yourself with those people that are going to make that difference. And I do and will say that age is a big proponent of that. Older players are generally just more mature in that situation.
Oh, yeah. You know, especially when it comes to team dynamics and, you know, who you're actually going to spend your time around. You know, age will come into it, and mentality of people will come into it, and stuff you can even do together will come into it. You know, having too much of a gap will definitely make a difference. I'm saying, for me, in-game, doesn't make a difference, but living with people outside the game, age and mentality, huge.
Agreed. Very much agreed. So that's going to wrap up that part. Difference in age. Good stuff. But one last question before we kick it off. Do you think this affects overall esports as a whole? Because in most situations, if you look at esports across the board, in most cases, EU has been a better region than NA. NA is usually the follower. Do you think it's because, and the way that I see it is, if I look at, like, Counter-Strike teams, if I look at League of Legends, etc., most regions have older players, but yet NA comes in as soon as these guys are fresh off the block, 17, ready to go. They've been groomed, and they get thrown into it. Performance-wise, they're a little bit rough, and they tilt harder. As soon as one thing doesn't go their way, they drop. Do you think the age and the maturity of, like, molding this younger crop of players helps out with that? Do you think that's why EU does a little bit better?
I think it's bigger than that, really. You can look at the mental side of it all, but at the end of the day, if you were to line up all of the EU players with all of the NA players, I would say EU's got stronger mechanical players anyway. So it's definitely a large amount of different things. And we're going to see it probably change as we move forward, because we see schools now really sort of pick up the esports side of it all. So it's going to be interesting to see if that changes as we move forward, or if that stays the same. But you could be on to something, but I think it's just a small part of something that is much bigger.
Agreed. I can't wait to get into that bigger picture in topic number 3, the SARBC era. And this is something that, as soon as I saw you typing this, I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to sit and listen. So I'm going to let you do that. I'm going to let you take control of this topic. This is all yours, Shogun.
It's all mine. All right, let's get some water down me.
Have it. Take your sips, take your breath, and then go. And start us off with
condensation's on the bottom. It's dripping all over me.
Context. But SARBC era and how it relates. Hit them with it. Go.
Right. So we came into this, we did, and SARBC, we had a lot of EU players. Even though the game did release earlier in NA, we always had a lot of high-level pro player. I mean, we played for a bloody golden name on a forum, so saying pro players on that one isn't really going to be meaning much. But there was always a lot more of them, and we had people like Dappy Duda, Cooksville, all of these players that you still see at the top were up there beforehand. You know, we had these tournaments where we'd occasionally come across each other, but they were very rare, and there was very few examples of them. If we went over to NA, we had players like Steve Bills, now known as Kronovi, and
turns out he's not as bad, right?
You know, we had Gambit, who was the Pie Man of Death. I've noticed that NA has done a lot more name changing than EU has. Lachinio, and you had a couple of other players outside of that as well, like Demic, who's no longer around, or anything else like that. And it was a case of EU's always had more skilled players. Obviously, the tip of the spike has always been pretty even between NA and EU. We've both had very strong killer teams. But when we look at it like a pyramid, NA is more like that, where there's like 3 players at the top, and then you get like 10 players here, and then you get loads of players over here. When you look at EU, it's more like that, where you get 5 players at the top, maybe 15 players over here, and that's continued over onto SARBC, because as we mentioned earlier, when you take on top teams all the time, you get better very quickly. Dappy Dudar, Marky Dudar now, is a great example of that. He came in on SARBC, and oh yeah, I forgot about Fireburner as well. He was up there for NA, but Dappy came in here, and he was awful, as you would expect him to be to start with. But within about a month, I would say, because he was constantly crashing with Cuxiers and all of these other top players. I mean, even I beat him to start him off with. But a month later, he played me, and because he's been taking on these top players over and over and over and over again, he ended up being way above everyone else. So it's a case of iron sharpening iron. And because EU has always had that depth extra where you're always taking on top players almost all the time, it's certainly carried over to Rocket League, where you look at it now and you say, right, EU, how many teams do we look here that actually look threatening? And we looked at it during the qualification and we just went, wow, there's like 30 teams here that are really good. And then we look at NA and we look at it and just go, wow, there's 13 teams here that are really good. And then Set to Destroy still makes it in. You know, you look at it and just go...
Not only did they make it in, but they knocked down Iris and Atelier to the lowers.
Yeah, okay. It was pretty incredible. But it's a case of the more good teams you have to start with, the more great teams that you seem to produce after that. Because you're just constantly taking on all of these top players all of the time, and you're producing more and more of them. When you look at NA, it's a case of, right, I want to be Kronovi. And you've got like 4 or 5 different top teams, and that's all you can really aim for. But you've got to get past the mid-tier, which is not as strong as EU's mid-tier. So it means that by the time you've got out of EU's mid-tier, you're already stronger than the majority of other teams out there.
It's interesting, and I completely agree with you in the aspect that a lot of the reasons why getting into the RLCS is huge is not only for obviously publicity purposes. I mean, you look at the attention that Set to Destroy is now getting on their social medias and everything else. It's a night and day difference. RLCS just gives you so much exposure. It's unbelievable. But the aspect of being able to play against those top teams on a weekly basis over and over again is invaluable. It's just the experience you get to play against players like that. You learn things. You understand, okay, I've been playing at such a slow pace, and even though I may have the potential to play at this pace, I'm just not used to it. And it's tough. Like, if you play, it's the same concept if you play with your buddies that are lower. So I've got buddies that hover right around in like the silver gold, and that's being nice area. If I play with them for too long and I go back to playing where I'm actually ranked, it's not pretty because I've adapted to play at their level, which is weird. Rather than playing up to my level, I revert back. And it's the same concept when playing up against pros is when you play at that level, eventually you adapt to learn or you get left behind. And in most cases, the people have the potential to be there. It's just a matter of they're not used to it. So Being able to, in EU, have more of that on a wider base, more consistently, it definitely makes the scene better on EU side. I'd agree to that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and it's also a case of right now, one of the reasons why I believe EU has got more strong teams is because they've got more strong players. You know, you can see it, what I've put at the very bottom here. It's a case of you've got more options available to you. If you are an NA team, say all of the teams broke up right now in NA, every single one of them, you would have maybe 9 or 10 players that if you wanted to be a top team, you would put together with. You know, if I was to break up right now, I'd be looking right, Kronovi, you know, Latch, Squishy, all of these sort of players that maybe I can get hold of, but there's only a very small amount of them. For EU, you're looking more at about 30 or so. You've got players like, you know, Marquis, Remco, Maestro, Doomsy, you know, he's not even close to making it, and yet you'd put him right up there. You know, you've got so many options here when you're on EU that if you wanted to create a new team completely from scratch, you could do it pretty easily. You know, you can look around and just go, all right, here are all the top players we have. Let's create a team. What do I need on my team? All right, I'm looking at you, Violent Panda. You do exactly what I need. You know, on NA, because you've got less of those top players, you've got less options. You've got to basically go with the other top players, not necessarily if they work as well with you, but for the sake of the fact that they are a top player and you need to get on with them right now.
Right. I mean, leftovers are a prime example. I mean, you take players with a ton of experience that are all quote unquote left over, and they're able to beat the two titans of it, and still, you know, like.
And when you look at the leftovers, what did they come in as before we even got started this season? They were like seed 16.
Right.
That's your leftovers. You know, we've already filled up, you know, 45 different players onto teams.
Good math.
And the leftover team is numbers 46 to 48.
Right. And they're still able, like, obviously it's a unique circumstance, but it fits the bill for our argument right now, and that's why we're using it. Because that's what people do. But no, it's exactly that. I mean, you look at, ideally in NA, 5 teams that I would say are pretty competitive. 6 through everything else is a hoopla of whatever. Obviously, you still have a couple breakout performers in that 5 through 10 area. But then when you get to 11 and below, oh my gosh, is it ugly. And that's not to be mean to NA. Obviously, I'm from NA or I support NA, but it's just not the same. Like, EU is cutthroat, man. Like, your top 10 is damn solid. Obviously, you have your standouts, obviously, but still, like, 1 through 10, like, against our 1 through 10, that kind of, like, if you did, like, a crew battle smash style, we ain't getting to our teams. It's just not happening.
Yeah, it really is a case of, if you were to do, say, seeds or power rankings 11 through 15, you pick those 5 teams from both regions, and you just had them play off, EU would probably wipe the floor with it.
Yeah.
You know, pretty easily, because we've got teams out there like Copenhagen Flames, not even close to qualifying, really, when you put them into the matchup. You've got all Copenhagen Flames. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones, not Vex, Rise Pro, all of these other ones that are still coming up and down from it. You know, and that's the problem for NA right now, is that they have improved a lot. They are probably where EU was like last season in terms of the depth they have. But the lack of depth means that there's no real way of improving your top teams. You know, there's no more options. Say Kronovi gets rid of one of his teammates. Who does he pick up? There's no one. So he has to stick with it. There's less options for NA right now, and that's what really costs them when it comes to putting together teams. Now, luckily for Kronovi, G2 seems to be exactly what it needs to be right now. And you can definitely say the same thing for NRG. But when you look past that, is it teams that have chosen to be together, or do you look at Selfless and just go, these are a team that had to be together?
Right. It's interesting to think about. And I mean, obviously we have our teams that we're really excited. You know, obviously you and I get to see it firsthand and cast it firsthand, which is really, really nice. But it's one of those things about these teams, like, we get excited about certain teams because of what they're doing. And it sucks that as an NA guy, I'm excited about a team because I'm excited that they might be able to compete with an EU team. Not because they're the better team, but because I think we finally have a chance to compete with the other region. You know? Like, I wish it was like, yo, these guys are damn good, they're going to crush. Not, these guys are good, hopefully they can compete with this other region. And it's a different mentality, but the exciting thing, and I guess this is the last thing we can kind of talk about, unless you have any other options, is something that a lot of people that should know, but if they don't, the difference in playstyle between NA and EU, it's pretty easily summed up. So we'll save that last. Anything else you want to touch on for the SARBC era stuff?
No, I feel like transitioned pretty well. It's just there were more players on EU. There's now more players on Rocket League for EU.
Yeah, and I know Jacob was saying in chat too, population-wise, you guys have us by about 200 million too.
Yeah, but like 100 million of that is my ego, just duplicated.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. And then last but not least, just to summarize this. So for those that don't know, a lot of people are talking about like how NA plays too mechanical and stuff. The difference between NA and EU and playstyle. I'll take NA if you want to take EU, make it easy. NA is very mechanical in the aspect. They've got really smart players, good touches. Like they have the skill to do it, but they're very one-dimensional in the aspect. They fail to maintain possession, and it's getting better. Energy and G2 are getting a better example. If you watch G2 play, all their passes are with intent. They pass to each other. They pass to an open position. They pass to an area where their teammate is going to be the one to make the next touch. And in the past, and the way that it's been so long for NA, is that I see ball, I hit ball, get rid of ball, it's in our area. And then collapse, and hopefully we get a goal off of a mistake. The touches and stuff are there, but it's forced, and now it's becoming more organized and done with the aspect of intent in mind, and it's exciting to watch. It's a lot about your awareness in the aspect of, if I'm dribbling downfield and there's no one around me, why just hit the ball to the other team when I can just keep dribbling it? And that allows my teammates to get in a position, get boost. It builds time. And NA has not done that as of late, and they're starting to do it now, but for the longest time it was just hit ball up, chase ball, try to hit ball in net. Hopefully it works. If not, get back on defense and pray to God they don't counterattack.
Yeah, and it's very much the same across both regions, if we're being honest, in terms of how goals are being scored. The majority of goals we see in Rocket League, a mistake was made at some point by the defense. And I've been seeing it a lot because I've been trying to go through and kind of just grab clips of every goal that's been scored this season. It's the exact same for a lot of them. A mistake was made. Someone went up to try and challenge a ball that hit the top of the goal and came down, but they didn't get it, and someone came in for the rebound. And all of that comes down to what is the biggest thing in Rocket League: positioning. And it's a case of some people are better at it than others, but if you are not in the correct position, you cannot defend properly. And if you cannot defend properly, you are going to get scored on. And that is the exact same across both regions. It's just a case of having the better rotations, having the better positioning. And if you're a team that is trying to force the goal, you're probably going to give up that rotation pretty easily.
Well summarized. And understand, guys, that this conversation we're talking about only at the pro level. We're talking 3v3s. Playstyles between N and EU completely different in ones and in twos. It's totally different. So that's going to do it, I think. I mean, good shit. Good shit, man. So for everybody in chat, appreciate you guys all being here. Shogun, I don't know if you want to stick around for a Q&A or if you got stuff to do.
I'll stick around.
So we're going to cut the audio portion. That does it for us. If you guys want to watch this, it will be exported to YouTube. It's actually going to be on Gibbs' channel because we're trying to build that brand, you know. But yeah, it's so we can get it to the most people because my YouTube is poo. But if you guys do want to support either one of us, for all my social media, !social in chat. Otherwise, Shogun, his Twitter is right below his face. Usually he'd be holding a picture with a whiteboard and it says it and points down. At Callum the Shogun on Twitter. Otherwise, Mega Shogun RL on Twitch, I think.
Yeah.
And then YouTube is Mega Shogun, isn't it?
Yeah, just Mega Shogun. Just search for it and you'll probably find it.
Yeah, search for Mega Shogun, you'll find it. Simple as that. But good stuff. That is all of us and everything for Rocket Talk NA versus EU week number 1. Big shout out to Shogun for coming and talking with me today. But if you guys have questions, the floor is yours, chat. We will read them, try to make them a little bit more serious. Usually Marky comes in and talks about the